The autumn wind carried a warning as it whistled through the cracks of Penelope Porter's weathered cabin. But the real danger lurked inside where she lay shivering beneath 3 quilts, her fever climbing higher as her 4 young children huddled together in the corner, eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Virginia City, Nevada, 1872. The mining boom had begun to wane, but the harshness of frontier life remained unchanged. Penelope had come west with her husband 5 years earlier, following dreams of silver and a better future. Now, at 28, she was a widow with 4 mouths to feed, and consumption was slowly stealing what remained of her strength. "Mama," 7-year-old Emma approached the bed cautiously, her blonde braids askew. "Are you feeling better today?" Penelope attempted a smile, but it crumbled as another cough racked her thin frame. "Not yet, my love," she whispered, "but I will. Now, has Samuel fetched the water like I asked?" 9-year-old Samuel stepped forward, his father's determined jaw already evident in his young face. "Yes, Ma. I filled the bucket all the way to the top without spilling. That's my brave boy." Penelope's eyes drifted to her other children. 5-year-old Joseph with his perpetually untied shoes, and 3-year-old Lily who clutched her rag doll with fierce devotion. The children had learned to care for themselves more than any child should. Samuel had taken to chopping kindling, though the axe was nearly as tall as he was. Emma prepared simple meals and kept Lily clean. Joseph fetched eggs from their 3 remaining hens and made sure the cabin door stayed closed against the cold. "Ma's really sick," Samuel whispered to Emma that evening as they stirred a pot of watery bean soup over the fire. "What if she gets worse?" Emma's lower lip trembled, but she squared her shoulders the way she'd seen her mother do countless times. "Dr. Miller will help her," he promised. But Dr. Miller's last visit had been 2 weeks ago, and his grim expression as he departed told a story the children couldn't yet read. The next morning, Penelope couldn't rise from her bed. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, and her nightdress clung to her sweat-soaked body. Emma placed a cool cloth on her mother's forehead while Samuel stood at the window, watching the road with desperate hope. "Someone's coming," he suddenly shouted, pressing his nose against the dirty glass. On horseback, the children scrambled to the door, peering out at the approaching figure. The man sat tall in his saddle, broad-shouldered and trail-worn. His dark hat was pulled low against the sun, and a leather vest covered his faded blue shirt. "It's not the doctor," Samuel said, disappointment heavy in his voice. "Then who is it?" Emma asked, clutching Joseph's hand. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, tying his chestnut mare to the porch post. His boots were caked with dust, suggesting a long journey. When he removed his hat, they saw a weathered face with kind eyes beneath a shock of sand-colored hair. "Morning," he called, his voice deep and gentle. "Name's Tucker Daniels. I'm looking for the Porter place." Samuel stepped protectively in front of his siblings. "This is it. I'm Samuel Porter." The man nodded respectfully. "Pleased to meet you, Samuel Porter. Your mother would be Penelope, I take it." "She's sick," Emma blurted out. "Real sick." A shadow of concern crossed Tucker's face. "I'm sorry to hear that. I came because your Uncle James wrote to me." "Uncle James," Samuel frowned. "From St. Louis, the same. We rode together in the war. He asked me to check on you folks, seeing as I was heading this way." Tucker glanced at the children's thin faces and threadbare clothes. "Looks like I arrived just in time." Inside, Penelope struggled to sit up when she heard the unfamiliar male voice. Years of frontier living had taught her to be wary, especially now when she was at her most vulnerable. "Who's there?" she called weakly. Tucker ducked his head as he entered the low-ceilinged cabin, removing his hat. "Madam, I'm Tucker Daniels, friend of your brother-in-law, James. He asked me to stop by, see how you and the young ones are faring." Penelope's feverish eyes assessed him. Tall, sturdy built, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work. His face bore the marks of sun and wind, but his blue eyes conveyed sincerity. "James sent you?" she asked suspiciously. Tucker nodded, keeping a respectful distance. "He received your last letter, said it worried him some." A harsh cough interrupted her reply, and Tucker's expression grew concerned. "Madam, you're in a bad way. Have you seen a doctor?" "Dr. Miller came," Samuel supplied. "Said Ma needs medicine from Carson City, but we don't have the money to send for it." Tucker's jaw tightened as he surveyed the sparse cabin. A half-empty flour sack sat beside a nearly cold stove. The children's clothes were clean but patched multiple times. Everything spoke of careful management stretched to breaking point. "I'll fetch the doctor back here," he said decisively. "And the medicine too. Then we'll see what else needs doing." "We can't pay you," Penelope said, pride still evident despite her weakness. Tucker replaced his hat. "Wasn't asking for payment, madam. James and we have a debt between us. This is just settling accounts." As he turned to leave, little Lily suddenly ran forward and tugged at his pant leg. "Are you going to make Mama better?" she asked, her small voice trembling. Tucker knelt down to her level, his expression softening. "I'm sure going to try, little miss. What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered, still clutching her rag doll. "Well, Lily, you be brave for a few more hours. I'll be back before sundown." True to his word, Tucker returned with Dr. Miller and a package of medicine from the Carson City apothecary. The doctor examined Penelope with grave concentration while Tucker took the children outside. "You good with horses?" he asked Samuel, who nodded eagerly. "Then come help me unsaddle mine. She's had a long day." While Samuel tended to the mare under Tucker's guidance, Emma hovered nearby. "Sir." She finally ventured. "Are you staying in Virginia City long?" Tucker ran a hand through his hair. "That depends on what the doctor says, Miss Emma." When Dr. Miller emerged from the cabin, his expression confirmed Tucker's suspicions. The doctor pulled him aside, speaking in low tones. "It's consumption, advanced stage. The medicine will ease her suffering and might slow the progression, but—" He shook his head. "Those children will be orphans within a month, maybe two." Tucker's gaze drifted to the four small figures, now gathered by the well. "They have no other family nearby. None. James Porter is their closest kin, and St. Louis might as well be the moon from here." Dr. Miller hesitated. "There's the orphanage in Reno, but they'd likely be separated." That night, after ensuring Penelope took her medicine, and the children ate a proper meal from the supplies he'd brought, Tucker made a bed for himself on the cabin floor near the door. The children watched him with a mixture of curiosity and relief, while Penelope regarded him with grateful wariness. "You don't need to stay," she told him as he banked the fire for the night. Tucker continued his task without looking up. "Get some rest, Mrs. Porter. We'll talk more in the morning." For 3 days, Tucker Daniels upended his solitary existence for the sake of 5 strangers. He repaired the sagging porch, split enough firewood to last a month, and coaxed Penelope to eat small portions of the broth he prepared. The children followed him everywhere, watching in fascination as his capable hands restored order to their crumbling world. On the 4th morning, Tucker rode into town and found himself at the land office, examining property records. Then he visited the assayer's office, the general store, and finally the telegraph office. When he returned to the cabin, his decision was made. "Mrs. Porter," he said that evening after the children were asleep, "I'd like to propose an arrangement." Penelope sat propped against her pillows, the medicine having granted her a brief respite from the worst of her symptoms. "What sort of arrangement, Mr. Daniels?" "I've purchased the Cameron place, just over the ridge. It's been empty since old Abe died last spring." Good water, decent grazing land. She frowned in confusion. Why are you telling me this? Tucker cleared his throat, suddenly appearing younger than his 32 years. It's only half a mile from here, close enough that I could. That is, if you'd permit it, I could help out with things. The children, the property, whatever needs doing. Understanding dawned slowly on Penelope's pale face. You're proposing to stay? Yes, madam. Tucker met her gaze directly. Not in your home, of course. That wouldn't be proper, but nearby, close enough to be of use. Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Tucker looked down at his rough hands. James saved my life at Shiloh, carried me 3 miles with a bullet in my shoulder, and he hesitated. I know what it's like to be young with no one to turn to. My folks died of fever when I was 14. Penelope studied him, seeing beyond the trail dust to the man beneath. The children have taken to you. They're good kids, brave. And when I'm gone, she asked, her voice barely audible. What then? Tucker met her gaze unflinchingly. Then they'd have a roof over their heads and someone who cares what becomes of them. If you'd trust me with that responsibility. Tears filled Penelope's eyes as she looked toward the corner where her children slept. I don't have the luxury of pride anymore, Mr. Daniels. If you're offering to help us, I accept with gratitude. The following weeks established a new rhythm for the Porter household. Tucker rose before dawn, tended to his property, then came to help the children with their chores. He taught Samuel how to repair leather and sharpen tools, showed Emma better techniques for bread making, entertained Joseph with whittled animals, and never failed to greet Lily with a gentle tug on her braids. For Penelope, his presence was both a blessing and a poignant reminder of what her children would need after she was gone. She observed him carefully, noting his patience when Joseph knocked over the water bucket, his firm but fair redirection when Samuel shirked his studies, his willingness to brush Emma's hair when Penelope's hands trembled too badly to manage it. You're good with them, she remarked one evening as Tucker read a story to the younger children while Emma mended stockings nearby. He glanced up, a hint of color touching his tanned cheeks. They make it easy. As October gave way to November, Penelope's health declined further despite Tucker's vigilant administration of her medicine. The children sensed the change, clinging to her more desperately during her lucid moments. Tucker, she called weakly one evening after the children were asleep. I need to speak with you. He approached her bedside, concern evident in his features. What is it? Should I fetch the doctor? She shook her head. No, I need you to listen. Her breathing was labored, but her eyes were clear. I've written letters for each of the children. For when they're older, when they might need to hear their mother's voice. Tucker nodded solemnly. They're in my trunk under the blue shawl. She gripped his hand suddenly, her strength surprising. Promise me they'll stay together, no matter what. I promise, Penelope. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it felt right. They'll stay together. A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. Tell me about your place, the Cameron property. Tucker described the sturdy 2-room cabin with its stone fireplace, the creek that ran clear year-round, the stand of pines that blocked the worst of the winter wind. It sounds peaceful, she whispered. It's bigger than this place. Room enough for... He trailed off. For 4 growing children, she finished for him. And a man who needs a family as much as they need him. Early the next morning, Tucker found Penelope awake and surprisingly alert. She asked to be moved to the rocking chair by the window, where she could watch the children playing in the yard. They're happy when you're here, she said as Tucker arranged a quilt around her legs. I haven't heard Samuel laugh like that since before his father died. Tucker followed her gaze to where the boy was showing Joseph how to twirl a lasso, a skill Tucker had taught him the previous week. He's a quick study, all of them are. Penelope hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. "What will you tell people about why you're caring for another man's children?" Tucker considered this. "The truth, that I'm honoring a promise to a friend. Some will talk. Say unkind things," he shrugged. "People always talk, doesn't change what's right." She studied him for a long moment. "You're a good man, Tucker Daniels." That afternoon, Dr. Miller made his weekly visit. His examination was brief, his expression grim as he pulled Tucker aside. "It won't be long now," he said quietly. "Days, perhaps. Make sure the children have a chance to say goodbye." Tucker nodded, a lump forming in his throat. In just a month, these 5 people had transformed his solitary existence into something meaningful. The thought of Penelope's suffering ending brought a conflicted relief, but the knowledge of the children's impending grief weighed heavily on him. That night, Penelope asked to have all her children sleep near her. Tucker arranged pallets on the floor beside her bed, then prepared to leave for his own cabin. "Stay," Penelope whispered as he reached for his hat. "Please, I don't want them to be alone if—" She didn't finish the sentence. Tucker settled into the rocking chair, maintaining his vigil as the Porter family slept. In the small hours of the morning, Penelope's eyes opened, finding his in the dim firelight. "Tucker," she breathed, "you'll tell them I love them. Every day." "Every day," he promised. A peaceful expression settled over her features. "Thank you for coming into our lives." By dawn, Penelope Porter was gone, slipping away quietly while her children slept and Tucker kept watch. He allowed himself a moment of grief for the gentle woman he'd come to admire, then steeled himself for the task ahead. The children's reactions to their mother's passing varied according to their ages and temperaments. Samuel retreated into stoic silence, his young shoulders rigid with the effort of containing his emotions. Emma wept openly, clinging to her younger siblings as if afraid they too might disappear. Joseph asked repeatedly when Mama would wake up, unable to comprehend the permanence of death. Lily simply crawled into Tucker's lap and remained there, her small body trembling. The funeral was held 2 days later in the small cemetery on the edge of town. The turnout was larger than Tucker expected, revealing that Penelope had touched many lives in Virginia City despite her recent seclusion. "She used to help everyone," the baker's wife explained to Tucker as she pressed a covered dish into his hands after the service. When the influenza came through last winter, Penelope was at every sipped with broth and compresses, even with 4 little ones at home. "That sounds like her," Tucker said softly, remembering how Penelope had apologized for being a burden even as she lay dying. The days following the funeral tested Tucker's resolve and creativity. Samuel refused to eat until Tucker invited him to help repair the broken wagon wheel, engaging him in conversation about his father while they worked. Emma threw herself into caring for her siblings with such intensity that Tucker had to gently coax her to rest. Joseph's nightmares woke the household 3 nights running, until Tucker fashioned a dream catcher using skills learned from a Paiute friend years before. Lily simply shadowed Tucker everywhere, her small hand perpetually seeking his. A week after the funeral, Virginia City's mayor paid a visit to the Porter cabin. Harold Jenkins was a portly man with political aspirations beyond the mining town, and his concern appeared more performative than genuine. "The town council has been discussing the children's situation," he announced, declining Tucker's offer of coffee. "The orphanage in Reno has agreed to take them." Tucker's jaw tightened. "That won't be necessary. I've made arrangements for their care." Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "You, a single man with no relation to them. Hardly appropriate, Mr. Daniels." "I gave their mother my word," Tucker replied evenly. "They'll be coming to live with me at the Cameron place." "Most irregular," Jenkins huffed. The townspeople will talk. Tucker's patience thinned. Let them. These children stay together under my roof. I've already filed guardianship papers with Judge Wilson. After the mayor departed, Tucker found Samuel sitting on the porch steps, his young face troubled. "You heard?" Tucker asked, settling beside him. Samuel nodded. "Are they going to make us go to the orphanage?" "No." Tucker's voice left no room for doubt. "I promised your mother you'd all stay together, and you will. We're moving to my place tomorrow." The boy studied the ground. "Why are you doing this? We're not your responsibility." Tucker considered his words carefully. "When I was younger than you, I lost both my parents in the same week. I know what it is to feel like the ground disappeared beneath your feet. What happened to you? I was sent to my uncle's farm in Kansas. He was a hard man who saw children as free labor, nothing more." Samuel looked up, understanding dawning. "Is that why you left home?" Tucker nodded. "Ran away at 16, worked cattle drives, fought in the war, then drifted until I found a place that felt right. Virginia City, this area, yes." Tucker gazed toward the mountains. "There's peace here and possibility. I want that for all of you." The move to Tucker's property the next day marked a new chapter for the makeshift family. The Cameron cabin was indeed larger than the Porter's home, with a proper bedroom that Tucker immediately designated for Emma and Lily, converting the main room to accommodate himself and the boys with curtained-off sleeping areas. "It's not fancy," he apologized as the children explored. "But it's sound and warm. It has a real fireplace," Emma marveled, running her hand along the stone. "And look," Joseph exclaimed, pointing out the window. "Horses." Tucker smiled. "Just two for now. The bay gelding is Thunder and the pinto mare is Patches. Maybe you can help me train them, Samuel." The boy's eyes widened with interest for the first time since his mother's death. The adjustment to their new living arrangement wasn't without challenges. Tucker knew cattle and horses, not children. He burned the breakfast biscuits 3 mornings running until Emma gently showed him the proper way to work the wood stove. He discovered that Joseph's socks never matched because the boy couldn't tell colors apart. He learned that Lily still needed help bathing, a task he awkwardly delegated to Emma until he could find a more permanent solution. The town's reaction to Tucker's guardianship of the Porter children was mixed. Some, like Dr. Miller and the blacksmith, openly supported his decision. Others whispered behind their hands when Tucker brought the children to church or the general store. "It ain't natural. A bachelor raising 4 youngsters." Tucker overheard the butcher's wife commenting one afternoon. "Mark my words, he'll tire of playing father and ship them off to that orphanage before winter's through." Tucker gritted his teeth and focused on selecting cuts of meat for the week ahead, pretending not to hear. But Samuel, standing beside him, absorbed every word, his expression closing off once more. That evening, Tucker found the boy sitting alone by the creek that bordered their property. Without speaking, he sat down beside him, letting the peaceful sound of running water fill the silence between them. Finally, Samuel spoke. "Are you going to send us away?" Tucker felt a pang at the fear behind the question. "No, Samuel, never. Is that what's worrying you?" The boy picked up a stone and tossed it into the water. "Mrs. Henson said you would, that men like you don't stay. Men like me. Drifters. She said you'd been all over, never settling down, that you'd get restless." Tucker sighed. "I've traveled a fair bit, that's true. But do you know why I bought this place, months before I ever met you and your family?" Samuel shook his head. "Because I was tired of drifting. I wanted roots, something of my own." Tucker gazed across the property. "I've been looking for home my whole life, Samuel, and as strange as it might seem, I think I found it the day I rode up to your cabin and 4 brave children greeted me on the porch." Samuel studied him, searching for truth. You don't mind being stuck with us? Tucker ruffled the boy's hair, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Being stuck with you four is the best thing that's ever happened to me. We're family now. Different from most, maybe, but family all the same. As winter descended on Nevada territory, the Daniels Porter household established new traditions. Tucker taught the children to play checkers and poker, with buttons instead of money. Emma learned to bake her mother's cinnamon bread using a recipe Penelope had carefully recorded. Samuel began accompanying Tucker on his twice-weekly trips to check the property's boundaries, developing horsemanship skills that made him stand taller. Joseph revealed a talent for carving small figurines, which Tucker encouraged by providing suitable wood and a safe knife. Lily slowly began sleeping through the night without tears. Christmas approached, bringing both anticipation and melancholy to the cabin. It would be their first holiday without Penelope, a fact that hung unspoken in the air as Tucker hauled in a pine tree, and the children decorated it with paper chains and dried berries. Mama always sang carols on Christmas Eve, Emma mentioned quietly as they worked. Tucker, who couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, nodded solemnly. Then we'll sing them too. You'll have to teach me the words. On Christmas morning, the children were surprised to find small, thoughtfully chosen gifts beneath the tree. A jackknife for Samuel, fabric and thread for Emma's doll making, a set of colored pencils for Joseph, and a wooden rocking horse for Lily that Tucker had crafted in secret late at night. How did you know? Joseph asked in wonder as he examined his pencils. Tucker smiled. I pay attention. Later that day, as snow fell gently outside, there was a knock at the door. Tucker opened it to find a group of townspeople led by Dr. Miller, their arms laden with food and parcels. Merry Christmas, the doctor greeted him. We thought you might appreciate some company today. Tucker stood speechless as the visitors filed in, bearing hams and pies, hand-knit scarves, and small toys for the children. Among them were faces he recognized from Penelope's funeral: the baker and his wife, the schoolteacher, the blacksmith, even the telegraph operator who had sent Tucker's message to James Porter weeks ago. Why? Tucker finally managed to ask as Dr. Miller helped him make space for all the dishes. Because that's what neighbors do, the doctor replied simply. Penelope understood that better than most. She would have wanted her children surrounded by community today. As the cabin filled with warmth and conversation, Tucker watched the Porter children interact with the visitors. Their grief was still evident in quiet moments, but joy had begun to reappear in their lives. Samuel laughing at the blacksmith's story, Emma proudly showing her needlework to the baker's wife, Joseph explaining his drawings to the schoolteacher, Lily contentedly perched on Tucker's knee as she examined her new doll. When the visitors departed as evening fell, Tucker felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. This chaotic, unexpected life he'd stumbled into was more demanding than any cattle drive or mining claim, but infinitely more rewarding. Tucker. Emma approached as he washed the last of the dishes. Can we put some food on Mama's grave tomorrow to share our Christmas with her? Tucker dried his hands and pulled her into a one-armed hug. That's a fine idea, Emma. We'll all go. Winter gradually released its grip on the land, and with spring came new challenges and opportunities. Tucker expanded the vegetable garden, teaching the children about planting and tending crops. He added 3 milk cows to their small herd, and Emma proved to have a natural touch with the animals. Samuel grew 2 inches in as many months, outgrowing his clothes and developing a young man's appetite that kept Tucker hunting regularly to supplement their meals. One April morning, Tucker was repairing the chicken coop when he heard hoofbeats approaching. Straightening, he spotted a well-dressed man on an expensive-looking horse making his way up the path to the cabin. "Can I help you?" Tucker called, setting down his hammer. The stranger dismounted, removing his hat to reveal dark hair and familiar features that made Tucker's heart sink. He'd recognize that Porter jawline anywhere. "I'm looking for Tucker Daniels," the man said. "I'm James Porter." Tucker wiped his hands on his pants and stepped forward. "James, wasn't expecting you." The two men sized each other up, their shared history and current circumstances creating an awkward tension. "I came as soon as I could arrange it," James said. "Your telegram about Penelope, and you're taking in the children. I needed to see for myself." Before Tucker could respond, the cabin door flew open and the children spilled out. They stopped short at the sight of the stranger, instinctively gathering around Tucker. "Children," Tucker said carefully, "this is your Uncle James, your father's brother." James Porter's expression softened as he looked at his nieces and nephews. "My God, Samuel, you're the image of your father at that age." Samuel shifted uncomfortably, moving closer to Tucker. "You knew our pa." "He was my brother," James replied. "I've been in St. Louis these past years, but when Mr. Daniels wrote about your mother's passing, I knew I had to come." Emma, ever practical, asked, "Are you staying for supper, Uncle James?" A brief smile crossed the man's face. "If I'm invited, yes." That evening, over a simple meal of rabbit stew and cornbread, James Porter explained his prolonged absence from his brother's family and his current circumstances. "After the war, I went back to St. Louis and joined my wife's father in his shipping business. We've done well, very well. When Robert wrote that he was taking Penelope and Samuel west, I offered them a place with us, but you know how stubborn your father was." Tucker observed the children's reactions to this new connection to their past. Samuel listened intently, hungry for stories about the father he barely remembered. Emma watched her uncle with cautious assessment. Joseph and Lily were more interested in the peppermint sticks James had brought them than in his explanations. After the children were asleep, James and Tucker sat by the fire, nursing cups of coffee laced with whiskey. "You've done right by them," James acknowledged. "They seem well-adjusted considering." Tucker nodded. "They're strong kids like their mother." James studied the amber liquid in his cup. "I've come to take them back to St. Louis with me." Though Tucker had been half expecting this, the words still hit him like a physical blow. "I see. It's the sensible solution," James continued. "My wife and I have a large home, servants, access to the finest schools. The children would want for nothing, except the only home they've known, their friends, their memories of their mother." Tucker's voice remained level despite the storm brewing inside him. "And they'd be separated from each other during school terms, I assume." James shifted uncomfortably. "The boys would attend boarding school, yes. The girls would have governesses until they're older. It's the done thing in our circle. I promised Penelope they'd stay together." Tucker set his cup down with deliberate care. "And they've already lost enough. With all due respect, Daniels, you're not family. I am." James leaned forward. "I appreciate what you've done, stepping in when they had no one else, but I'm their uncle, their blood kin. I can provide opportunities you never could." Tucker gazed into the fire, weighing his response carefully. "You planning to ask them what they want, their children? They don't know what's best for them, don't they? Samuel's helping run this ranch at 9 years old. Emma's practically a second mother to the little ones. They've endured more loss in their short lives than most adults." James frowned. "You're saying you'll fight me on this, if I have to?" Tucker met his gaze steadily. "Judge Wilson granted me legal guardianship. Those papers are in order." Guardianship can be contested, especially by a blood relative with means. The implicit threat hung between them, heavy as the storm clouds gathering outside. Tucker took a deep breath, tamping down the anger and fear threatening to overwhelm him. "Before you start making legal threats, James, I'd ask you to spend a few days here. Watch how the children have built a life, see what you'd be uprooting." After a tense moment, James nodded reluctantly. "Fair enough. I'll stay through the weekend." The next few days became an unspoken contest for the children's future. James Porter brought out gifts he'd packed store-bought toys and clothes far finer than anything the children owned. Tucker said nothing, simply continuing the ranch routines that had become the framework of their shared life. On Friday morning, Tucker took James and the children fishing at the creek. Samuel proudly demonstrated the technique Tucker had taught him, while Emma organized a picnic lunch with the efficiency of someone twice her age. "You've taught them practical skills," James observed as they watched Samuel help Joseph bait his hook. "I'll grant you that." "They've taught me plenty too," Tucker replied. "Patience, joy in simple things, how to see the world fresh every morning." That afternoon, a spring thunderstorm drove them back to the cabin. As rain pounded the roof, Tucker pulled out the checkerboard, and the children taught their uncle the special rules for their family tournament. Lily climbed onto James's lap with the easy trust of a child, examining his gold pocket watch with fascination. "Tell us about our father," Samuel requested during a lull in the games. "What was he like as a boy?" James seemed startled by the question, but then his expression softened. "Robert was always the brave one. When we were boys, there was this huge oak tree behind our house in Kentucky. All the children were scared to climb it because the lowest branches were so high up. But Robert, he fashioned himself a rope with knots and would shimmy up like a squirrel." "Did you climb it too?" Joseph asked. James chuckled. "Eventually. Robert wouldn't let me hear the end of it until I did. That was his way pushing everyone to be braver, try harder." The stories continued through dinner, painting a picture of the father the children had lost too young. Tucker noticed how Samuel's shoulders gradually relaxed, how Emma smiled more freely as she connected these tales to her own faint memories. Later, when the younger children were asleep, James found Tucker on the porch, staring at the clearing sky. "They love you," James said simply. Tucker didn't respond. "I watched them today. The way they look to you, not just for approval but for security. The way even Samuel, stubborn as his father ever was, seeks your opinion without realizing he's doing it." "They needed someone," Tucker said quietly. "I was here." James shook his head. "It's more than that. You've become their father in all but name." He paused. "And I think my brother would have approved." The next morning, James announced his decision at breakfast. "I'll be returning to St. Louis tomorrow." The children exchanged confused glances. "Alone?" Emma finally asked, her voice small. James nodded. "Yes, Emma, alone. Your place is here with Tucker and with each other." Relief washed over the children's faces, though Samuel tried to maintain his composure. "You're not taking us away?" "No." James's gaze met Tucker's across the table. "But I will be sending money regularly for your education and needs, and I expect letters, at least monthly, telling me everything you're learning and doing." "We can write letters," Emma agreed eagerly. "Can't we, Tucker?" "Absolutely," Tucker affirmed, the knot in his chest finally loosening. "And perhaps Uncle James can visit again next summer." James smiled, the first genuine smile Tucker had seen from him. "I'd like that very much." After James departed the following day, Tucker found himself ambushed by 4 children as he returned from the barn. "Did you know," Samuel demanded, "that he might take us away?" Tucker sighed, leading them to the porch where they could all sit together. "I worried it might be a possibility." "He's your blood kin, after all. But you fought for us." Emma's eyes were wide. "Didn't have to fight in the end," Tucker said. "Your uncle is a reasonable man. He saw what I already knew, that you belong here together. With you, Lily added, climbing onto his lap as she often did. Tucker's throat tightened. Yes, Sprout. With me. As spring blossomed into summer, life at the Daniels Ranch settled into comfortable patterns. The vegetable garden thrived, the livestock multiplied, and the children grew stronger and more confident. Tucker expanded his cattle herd with James Porter's financial assistance, creating a sustainable future for the family. The town's attitude toward their unconventional household gradually shifted as well. When Joseph contracted measles in June, the women of Virginia City organized a rotation to help with nursing duties and household tasks. When Tucker's hay wagon broke an axle during harvest, 3 neighboring ranchers arrived to assist with repairs and bringing in the crop. "Looks like you're becoming a respected member of the community, Mr. Daniels," Dr. Miller commented during one of his now social visits. Tucker shrugged, uncomfortable with the observation. "Just trying to raise these kids right, and succeeding admirably." The doctor watched the children playing a complicated game of their own invention in the yard. "Though I wonder if something isn't missing from the equation." Tucker raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "These children need a mother figure, especially the girls as they grow older. And you, my friend, could use a partner in this endeavor." Tucker felt heat rise in his face. "Hadn't given it much thought." Dr. Miller chuckled. "Perhaps you should. Priscilla Warren has certainly given it thought, judging by how often she inquires after you and the children." The schoolteacher, Tucker was genuinely surprised. "She's barely spoken 2 words to me. She's shy, and probably intimidated by taking on 4 children, but I've seen how she watches you when you bring the younger ones to town." Tucker dismissed the idea, but found it returning to his thoughts in quiet moments. At 32, he'd long ago abandoned notions of marriage and a traditional family. His life had been shaped by war and wandering, not courtship and commitment. Yet now, with 4 children depending on him, perhaps the doctor's suggestion wasn't as far-fetched as it initially seemed. The following Sunday after church, Tucker found himself lingering as the congregation dispersed, watching Priscilla Warren gather her Bible and hymnal. She was a slender woman of about 25, with chestnut hair neatly pinned beneath a modest hat. Not a classic beauty, but her face lit up when she smiled at her students, revealing a warmth that Tucker found increasingly appealing. "Miss Warren," he found himself saying as she turned to leave. "Might I have a word?" She blinked in surprise, a becoming flush coloring her cheeks. "Of course, Mr. Daniels." Tucker suddenly realized he hadn't planned what to say. "I wanted to thank you for the books you sent home with Joseph. He's been practicing his letters every evening." Her smile was genuine. "He's a bright boy. All your children are exceptionally intelligent." "Not mine by blood," Tucker corrected automatically, then wondered why he felt the need to make that distinction. "Family isn't always about blood, Mr. Daniels." Her gaze was direct despite her blush. "You've given those children something precious, stability and love after tremendous loss. That makes you their father in all the ways that truly matter." Tucker was struck by her insight and the conviction in her voice. "Thank you for saying that, Miss Warren." An awkward silence fell between them until Emma appeared at Tucker's elbow. "Tucker, Joseph says he's starving to death and might faint if we don't get dinner soon." Priscilla laughed, the sound musical. "Joseph does have a flair for the dramatic." Tucker found himself smiling. "That he does." "Well, I'd better feed the boy before he wastes away." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps you'd like to join us for Sunday dinner sometime, Miss Warren. The children would enjoy having their teacher visit." Her eyes widened slightly. "I would like that very much, Mr. Daniels." The following Sunday, Priscilla Warren arrived at the Daniels Ranch wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes and carrying an apple pie that filled the cabin with cinnamon fragrance. The children welcomed her enthusiastically, eager to show off their home and their accomplishments. "Samuel built that chair himself," Emma informed her proudly, pointing to a somewhat lopsided but sturdy construction by the fireplace. "Tucker showed me how," Samuel added, his chest puffing slightly. "We're going to build a proper desk for Emma next." Priscilla admired each child's contribution to the household. Joseph's drawings hung on the walls, Lily's carefully arranged wildflowers on the table, Emma's neatly hemmed curtains brightening the windows. Tucker watched her interactions with the children, noting her genuine interest and gentle manner. "You've created something special here," she told Tucker as they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the children play in the yard. "A true home." "We're still figuring things out day by day," he admitted. "Especially with the girls. I worry I'm not equipped to guide them as they grow older." Priscilla nodded thoughtfully. "It's a legitimate concern. Girls need a woman's guidance in certain matters, Dr. Miller mentioned something similar," Tucker said, then immediately regretted bringing up the doctor's matchmaking hints, but Priscilla didn't seem offended. "Dr. Miller is a wise man and quite the observer of human nature." Their conversation flowed easily after that initial awkwardness, covering topics from ranching to literature to childhood memories. Tucker found himself sharing stories he hadn't recounted in years, drawn out by Priscilla's attentive listening and thoughtful responses. When she departed that evening, Tucker felt a curious lightness he hadn't experienced in a long time. The children, too, seemed energized by her visit. "Is Miss Warren going to come again?" Lily asked as Tucker tucked her into bed. "Would you like that?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "She smells nice, like flowers and books," Tucker chuckled. "That's a fine description, Sprout." Over the next few months, Priscilla Warren became a regular visitor to the ranch. She helped Emma with her needlework, read to Joseph and Lily, discussed history books with Samuel, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, became part of their family rhythm. Tucker found himself looking forward to her visits with an anticipation that surprised him, planning small improvements to the property that he hoped she would notice and approve. As summer waned, Tucker made a decision. After ensuring the children were occupied with chores, he rode into town and made 2 important stops at the jeweler's and at Dr. Miller's house. "I want to do this properly," he explained to the doctor. "Need your advice." Dr. Miller smiled broadly. "About time, my friend, about time." The following Saturday, Tucker arranged for the children to spend the day with the blacksmith's family, who had become close friends. Then he collected Priscilla in the freshly painted wagon, a picnic basket tucked behind the seat. "Where are we going?" she asked as they left town, her eyes bright with curiosity. "There's a spot up in the foothills I want to show you," Tucker replied, oddly nervous despite having faced far more dangerous situations without blinking. "Best view in the territory." The September day was perfect, clear skies, gentle breeze, the aspen leaves just beginning to turn gold against the evergreens. Tucker helped Priscilla down from the wagon when they reached a small clearing overlooking the valley, Virginia City visible as a distant cluster of buildings below. "It's breathtaking," Priscilla said, turning slowly to take in the panorama. Tucker spread a blanket beneath a stand of pines and unpacked the lunch he'd prepared with Emma's help: cold chicken, fresh bread, early apples from their tree. They ate companionably, the conversation flowing easily between them as always. When the meal was finished, Tucker steeled himself for what came next. "Priscilla," he began, using her given name for the first time. "These past months having you in our lives, it's changed things, for the better." She lowered her eyes, her cheeks coloring. "I've treasured the time with all of you. Tucker took a deep breath. The children need a mother, someone kind and patient and wise, someone who already loves them, as I believe you do. Her eyes lifted to his, wide with surprise and something else, hope, perhaps. And I find that I need something too, he continued, his voice growing steadier. A partner, a friend, someone to share the joys and burdens with. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing the small box from the jeweler. Someone to love. Priscilla's hands flew to her mouth as Tucker opened the box, revealing a simple gold band set with a small pearl. It's not fancy, he apologized, but it's offered with a whole heart. Priscilla Warren, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife and a mother to our children? Tears filled her blue eyes. Tucker Daniels, when you rode into Virginia City last year, a lonely cowboy taking on 4 orphan children, I thought you were either a saint or a fool. Tucker chuckled despite his tension. Probably a bit of both. And I told myself not to admire you too much, not to get attached to those children, she continued. But it was already too late. I fell in love with all of you, piece by piece, day by day. Is that a yes? Tucker asked, hope rising in his chest. Priscilla's smile was radiant through her tears. Yes. 1,000 times yes. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Virginia City, met with general approval and some good-natured teasing. The children's reactions, however, were what mattered most to Tucker and Priscilla. Does this mean Miss Warren will live here with us? Joseph asked when Tucker gathered them to share the news. Yes, and she won't be Miss Warren anymore. She'll be Mrs. Daniels, Tucker explained, Emma's brow furrowed. Will she be our mother now? Priscilla knelt to the girl's level. I would never try to replace your mother, Emma. Penelope will always be your mother, and I know how much you love and miss her. But, Tucker added gently, Priscilla will be a mother to you in the ways you need now, caring for you, teaching you, loving you. If you'll let her. Samuel, silent until now, fixed his serious gaze on Priscilla. Do you love Tucker? She met his eyes without hesitation. Very much. And us. Do you love us too? With all my heart, Samuel. Each of you exactly as you are. The boy nodded, apparently satisfied. Then I think my mother would approve. Lily, who had been watching the exchange with solemn attention, suddenly smiled and threw her arms around Priscilla's neck. I always wanted 2 mothers. The wedding took place on a crisp October day, exactly 1 year after Penelope Porter's passing. Tucker and Priscilla had chosen the date deliberately not to erase the memory of loss, but to transform the anniversary into a day that also celebrated new beginnings. The ceremony was held at the ranch, with Judge Wilson officiating and the children playing important roles. Samuel stood as Tucker's best man, Emma as Priscilla's maid of honor. Joseph carried the rings on a small cushion he had embroidered himself under Emma's guidance. Lily scattered wildflower petals along the path from the house to the arbor Tucker had built for the occasion. James Porter traveled from St. Louis for the wedding, bringing gifts for each child and a substantial check that he insisted was seed money for the ranch's future. Dr. Miller and his wife hosted the reception, their spacious yard filled with well-wishers from throughout the county. As the autumn sun began to set, casting golden light across the celebration, Tucker found himself momentarily apart from the festivities, watching his new wife dance with Joseph standing on her toes. The sight filled him with such overwhelming gratitude that he had to take a deep breath to steady himself. She's a fine woman, James Porter said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of whiskey. You've chosen well. Tucker accepted the offered glass. She chose us, truth be told. Not many women would take on a ready-made family of this size. Not many men would either, James pointed out. What you did for my brother's children, I'll never be able to thank you enough. Tucker shook his head. No thanks needed. They saved me as much as I helped them. James raised his glass. To family, the ones we're born to and the ones we make. Tucker clinked his glass against James's. To family. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children were finally asleep in the main house, with Dr. and Mrs. Miller staying over as chaperones, Tucker and Priscilla walked hand in hand to the small cabin Tucker had built on the property for their private quarters. "Are you happy, Mrs. Daniels?" Tucker asked as they reached the doorway decked with ribbons and flowers by Emma's artistic hand. Priscilla's smile was luminous in the moonlight. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." Tucker lifted her into his arms to carry her across the threshold, their laughter mingling in the crisp night air. The years that followed brought both joys and challenges to the Daniels family. The ranch prospered, expanding to include more cattle, horses, and eventually sheep at Priscilla's suggestion. The children thrived under the loving guidance of both parents, each finding their own path while remaining tightly bonded as a family. Samuel, serious and determined like his biological father, developed into Tucker's right hand on the ranch, displaying a natural talent for animal husbandry and business management. Emma's domestic skills evolved into a small side business selling her preserves and baked goods to Virginia City's finest hotel. Joseph's artistic abilities flourished under Priscilla's encouragement, leading to an apprenticeship with a respected portraitist in Carson City. Lily, the baby who remembered little of life before Tucker, grew into a spirited young woman with her mother's compassion and her adoptive father's quiet strength. In the spring of 1875, Priscilla gave birth to twins, a boy they named Robert James after both Porter brothers, and a girl they called Hope Penelope, honoring the past while embracing the future. The older children doted on their half-siblings, especially Samuel, who took his role as eldest brother with profound seriousness. On a warm summer evening in 1882, 10 years after Tucker had first ridden up to the Porter cabin, the expanded Daniels family gathered on the wide porch of their now substantial ranch house. 18-year-old Samuel had just returned from his first year at a Sacramento agricultural college. Emma, at 16, was considering a teaching position at the school where Priscilla had once taught. 14-year-old Joseph displayed his latest paintings, while 12-year-old Lily helped the 7-year-old twins catch fireflies in glass jars. Tucker sat beside Priscilla, his arm around her shoulders, watching their children with quiet pride. "Did you ever imagine this?" Priscilla asked softly, following his gaze. "When you first came to Virginia City, did you picture yourself here, surrounded by family?" Tucker shook his head. "Never. I thought I'd check on James's sister-in-law and her children, maybe help out for a week or two, then move on. That was my pattern, never staying long enough to form attachments." "What changed?" she asked, though she knew the story well. Tucker smiled, remembering that pivotal moment. "I rode up to that cabin and saw 4 frightened, determined children on the porch. Samuel standing so straight, trying to be the man of the house at 9 years old. Emma with flour on her apron from trying to make bread. Joseph with his untied shoes. Tiny Lily clutching that rag doll." He paused, emotion catching in his throat even after all these years. "And I knew I couldn't ride away." Priscilla squeezed his hand. "Providence, or the best kind of accident," Tucker replied, watching as Samuel hoisted one of the twins onto his shoulders. "Either way, I found my purpose that day, and eventually my heart's home." As twilight deepened into night, Tucker Daniels looked out at the land he'd cultivated, and the family he'd nurtured, children of his blood and children of his choice, all equally beloved, and knew with absolute certainty that the lonely cowboy who had once drifted through life had finally, truly found his way home.